I was humiliated by the man I loved and almost lost my life, but I rebuilt myself and won. I never thought love could hurt so much. My life seemed ordinary, a routine of work, friends, family, but something inside me always demanded more than I could give. My name is Livia. I'm 28 years old, and when everything started to fall apart, I was living in São Paulo, trying to balance my career and feelings, without realizing I was losing myself. I always believed that patience and forgiveness were synonymous with true love, and that belief cost me dearly. Henrique came into my life as if he had the map to everything I most wanted to hear: charm, attention, compliments. But little by little, that mask began to slip, and the man I thought charming revealed himself to be cruel, ironic, and controlling. I found myself questioning my worth with every veiled criticism, every subtly offensive comment, every belittling joke. At first, I thought it was just my insecurity, but it wasn't long before my best friend, Natalia, warned me. "He doesn't respect you, Livia. Look how he treats you." And I, stubborn, let my hope for true love speak louder than reality. The turning point came at a dinner I'll never forget. Henrique publicly humiliated me in front of friends I considered close, calling me ugly and laughing as if it were funny. He even left me alone with the bill, as if my presence held no value. I felt my world crumble in that instant. Shame burned my skin. My heart beat so fast it felt like it was about to leap out of my chest, and a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief paralyzed me. The tears didn't come immediately, because my body went into defense mode, but the feeling of helplessness was absolute. I returned home feeling each step heavier, each thought crushing me, remembering every moment I'd let him lower my self-esteem. My mother, Celeste, trying to comfort me, said things that only reinforced my feelings of inferiority. Men are like that, daughter. Try to let it go. After that dinner, my life became an internal battle. I constantly questioned myself. Am I too weak? Do I deserve this? Work became difficult. My social interactions diminished, and I felt like I was sinking into a bottomless pit. I tried to distract myself, clinging to small pleasures, but every gesture of affection from Henrique was accompanied by veiled criticism, making me feel lost again. Natalia tried to reach out to me, invite me out, show me that I could exist outside of that relationship, but I pulled away, blaming myself for everything, believing that if I persisted, I could change Henrique. Every night I cried silently, hidden, feeling my own body tremble with tension and anxiety, wishing something inside me would change, but lacking the courage to admit that I needed help. At work, I met Eduardo, a new, kind, and attentive colleague. At first, it was just casual conversation, but he gradually sensed my fatigue and sadness. He never tried to pressure me. He was simply there, attentive and sincere, without judgment. I remember a rainy afternoon when he offered me an umbrella and a smile that seemed to illuminate something dim inside me. It was at that moment that I realized, respect doesn't hurt. It doesn't humiliate. It doesn't diminish. Eduardo didn't immediately become my romantic partner, but he was a point of reference that reminded me that there were alternatives to pain. I began to record my thoughts and emotions, trying to understand where I was losing myself and why. Each written word was like lifting a stone from my chest. Between setbacks and small victories, I began to realize I was tired of justifying myself. Every criticism from Henrique, every attack, was a reminder that I couldn't depend on someone who made me feel inferior. Anger mixed with sadness became fuel. I spent weeks reflecting on my patterns, on my excessive patience and forgiveness. The decision began to form. I needed to rebuild myself, value myself, not for him, but for myself. It was time to discover that my self-esteem couldn't depend on others. Looking in the mirror and liking what I saw became a daily exercise. Small actions, resuming exercise, watching my diet, resuming hobbies, writing about my feelings, began to give me back something I'd forgotten about: control over my own life. The first week after deciding to change was the hardest. Every old habit tried to pull me back, blaming myself for not being perfect, making excuses for Henrique, believing I could still fix something that was never mine. I woke up with a heavy heart, trembling hands, and the feeling that any misstep would send me back to the pain. But I also noticed small victories, smiling when I looked in the mirror, receiving messages from friends without fear of judgment, feeling pleasure in choosing my clothes without worrying about pleasing anyone. I discovered that, as I began to prioritize my needs, my mind gradually calmed down. Each day without contact with Henrique was a silent achievement, and although the loneliness was painful at first, it became my ally, allowing me to listen to my own feelings for the first time in years. Natalia approached me again, this time with firmness and patience. She reminded me of how lost I had become and how I deserved to be treated with respect. Long, sometimes painful conversations made me realize how much I had internalized Henrique's critical voice and my own insecurity. We cried together, laughed together, and little by little, the bond he had nearly destroyed became a pillar of strength. I began to realize that I didn't need anyone to rescue me, but having a support network made each step firmer. Conversations with Eduardo also helped me. He showed me, without complex words, that kindness is not weakness, that support and attention are gifts, not obligations. I learned to appreciate simple signs of care and to distinguish between those who contribute to my life and those who drain my energy. One day, alone at home, I realized I no longer felt that paralyzing fear that haunted me daily. The feeling of constant alert, that anxiety that made my chest tight, began to fade. Instead, I felt a strange calm, almost frightening at first, but liberating. I decided to go back to studying something I'd always loved, but had abandoned because I thought I didn't have the time, or that Henrique would disapprove. Signing up for a course, sitting down to read without guilt, even cooking for myself without thinking about pleasing others became acts of affirmation. Every small decision reinforced my autonomy. I was learning to respect myself, to set clear boundaries, and most importantly, to understand that no one could steal my value. Anger toward Henrique still lingered, especially on more difficult days, but I learned to transform it into energy to act on my own behalf. I began writing letters I never sent, outbursts that burned within me, recording every feeling of injustice, every silent tear. These words weren't for him, but for me, to remind me that my suffering wasn't in vain and that my reconstruction depended on my effort, not on his change. With each entry, I felt lighter, as if my heart grew a little, learning that dignity doesn't need applause, only consistency. At the same time, I began to take care of myself physically differently. It wasn't just vanity, it was recovery. Exercise that strengthened not only the body, but also the mind. Food that gave me energy, not momentary pleasure. Moments of leisure that once seemed trivial, but were now essential. Each practical action was a building block in rebuilding who I wanted to be. I discovered pleasure in being with myself, in making decisions that benefited me, and in realizing that the world wouldn't end if Henrique weren't by my side. The process wasn't linear. Some days were relapses, insecurities surfaced, but I no longer felt paralyzed. Each setback was just part of the learning process, not an absolute failure. Months passed since that night that publicly humiliated me, and with each passing day, I realized my life was changing. My gaze no longer sought external approval. My confidence grew silently, almost invisible to those who knew me superficially. At work, my ideas began to be heard, my opinions respected. Eduardo remained by my side, but not as a savior, but rather as a witness to my transformation. I felt my body lighter, my actions firmer, and most importantly, I was beginning to enjoy being myself again, without fear of being judged or diminished. I discovered that self-respect is the foundation of any healthy relationship, and that the love of someone who humiliates you is worthless. Then one day, it happened. Henrique showed up at the same project I was leading. My heart raced for a moment, but as I looked at him, I realized I felt neither fear nor intense anger. I felt only curiosity, a calm observation. He tried to approach me with that usual smile, full of charm, trying to provoke me or test my limits, but I was no longer vulnerable. I remained calm, speaking clearly, politely, but without leaving room for manipulation. He noticed, and his surprise was evident. It was the same person, but now I was different. The feeling was strange, a mixture of quiet power and tranquility I hadn't felt in years. During our reunion, I remembered every criticism, every humiliation, every silent tear he'd made me shed. But instead of revenge, I felt compassion for myself, for having allowed it, for having grown, for having survived. I felt no need to prove anything to him. My triumph wasn't external. I didn't need applause or his recognition. The most elegant exchange was silence, dignity, the smile that effortlessly appeared on my face. He tried charm, irony, manipulation, but he hit a wall. firm, secure, and above all, independent. For the first time, I felt my happiness didn't depend on anyone else. The reconstruction didn't happen overnight, nor was it perfect. I had setbacks, moments of doubt, memories that tightened my chest. Some nights I still woke up thinking about him, feeling anger or pain surge like unexpected waves. But I learned to breathe, to write, to talk to close friends, and to recognize that these feelings weren't signs of weakness, but of humanity. The most important thing was realizing that the change was within me, not in his actions. Each step toward my emotional autonomy, each daily achievement, was a reaffirmation that I was capable of living without depending on anyone's approval or control. Today, I can say I've found myself again. I've come to love myself again, to dream freely, to love without fear of self-denial. Henrique is still part of my past, but no longer part of my present. My journey of reconstruction has taught me the importance of setting boundaries, recognizing signs of abuse, and valuing my own well-being above all else. The feeling of freedom, of looking in the mirror and feeling whole, is something no insult or attempt at domination could take away. I learned above all that overcoming is not just about resisting, but about rebuilding yourself from the inside out, with patience, courage, and self-love. After that reunion, I realized that my transformation wasn't just internal, but also visible to those around me. At work, colleagues began treating me differently, respecting my opinions, asking for advice, and valuing my dedication. Every gesture, every recognition, was a confirmation that I no longer needed to seek validation from those who belittled me. Henrique might show up, try to provoke, but my life continued without depending on his presence. I began participating in social events I'd previously avoided, reconnected with old friendships, and felt more confident in interactions that had previously intimidated me. The feeling was one of expansion. Each step out of his shadow restored my freedom and the joy of existence. My relationship with my mother also began to change. Celeste, who had always been resigned and minimized my suffering, began to realize that her daughter was no longer the same. Conversations that were once superficial became sincere. She began to listen without judgment, and even became emotional when she noticed my growth. This change brought me enormous relief, as if I could share my strength without fear of being misinterpreted. I finally understood that the impact of abuse is not limited to the direct relationship, but reverberates throughout the family environment. And by showing that it was possible to rebuild, I ended up paving the way for my mother to rethink certain beliefs that reinforced abusive behavior. With Eduardo, my relationship deepened naturally, unhurriedly, without the need to prove anything. He remained a point of reference, but I realized that my worth didn't come from him or anyone else. It came from me. I began to allow myself small achievements, like traveling alone, investing in courses I'd always wanted, and allowing myself moments of guilt-free leisure. Each independent choice strengthened my self-esteem and solidified the certainty that I would no longer accept being diminished. I discovered that emotional freedom is built day after day, with conscious and repeated decisions, not just with grandiose moments or dramatic declarations. The memories of Henrique still lingered, of course. Sometimes they surfaced in dreams or unexpected thoughts, but today I can observe them without feeling paralyzing. Pain. Instead of suffering, I feel a lesson learned. Every criticism he made, every gesture of humiliation, became a reminder of how much I've grown and how much I can resist those who try to diminish me. It's curious to realize that when we rebuild ourselves, the power someone once held over us disappears effortlessly. Dignity, self-respect, and confidence become invisible shields that no external insult can breach. The rebuilding process isn't completely over yet. There are days when insecurity tries to return, when painful memories emerge unexpectedly. But I've learned not to run away from them, to deal with them consciously. I meditate, write, talk to people I trust, and allow myself to feel without letting myself be dominated. The feeling of being whole, of being able to make decisions without fear, is constant, even with small failures or bad days. Today, I know there's no magic formula, only persistence, courage, and self-love. Overcoming obstacles isn't a destination. It's a continuous journey, and I'm willing to walk it every day. Today, when I reflect on my journey, I realize it all began with the most intense pain I've ever felt. The public humiliation, the feeling of helplessness, the anger, and the sadness seemed unbearable at the time, but they were what pushed me to the decision that changed my life. I understood that it's not just about resisting someone who hurts us, but about rebuilding every shred of self-esteem we lose along the way. Every tear I shed, every sleepless night reflecting on my choices, transformed into silent strength. And it's this strength that allows me to look back today without resentment, only with learning. Life after reconstruction is lighter, clearer. I've begun to pay closer attention to my choices, prioritizing my well-being. I've learned that self-love isn't selfish, and that no one has the right to diminish our worth. Henrique is still a memory, but he no longer dictates my feelings or my self-esteem. I'm proud to have managed to transform pain into growth. Every small achievement, every gesture of self-care, reinforces the certainty that overcoming is possible, even when all seems lost. The feeling of emotional freedom is indescribable, because it means living without the invisible chains someone once tried to place on me. The support of friends and sincere people was essential, but the greatest change came from within. I discovered that we need to be our own pillars, that no one can save us if we are not willing to rescue ourselves. Each step in rebuilding required courage, persistence, and above all, patience with myself. I learned to recognize signs of abuse, set clear boundaries, and trust my feelings. The healing process is not linear, and I still have moments of insecurity, but today they no longer define me. My life is mine again, with conscious decisions, emotional freedom, and restored self-esteem. One of the most important lessons I take with me is that dignity is the best revenge. I didn't need to humiliate. I didn't need to respond to Henrique's provocation. I simply continued on my way, silently, firmly, and serenely. The feeling of being able to live without depending on someone who made me feel small is liberating. Every genuine smile, every gesture of self-love, every personal achievement is a reminder that my life doesn't need to be defined by those who diminished me, but by what I am capable of building for myself. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone going through something similar, it would be, don't lose yourself. Don't let anyone diminish your worth, and believe that it's possible to rebuild yourself. The pain is real, but the path to emotional freedom exists, and every step is worth it. Today I can honestly say that I'm stronger, more aware, and freer than I've ever been. And even though some remnants of the pain still linger, I know that the most important victory is internal, silent, and permanent. I've found myself again.